Hi, and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads. Today we are continuing in The Magic Circle by Katherine Neville. And in our last video, Ariel and Wolfgang Hauser barely survived an avalanche. And then right at the end of our video, Wolfgang told her that he was the one who had mailed her the manuscript. And that was the end of that section in the book. So this one is entitled The Matrix. We have a definition here. Matrix, Latin, equals womb. That which encloses anything or gives origin to anything. A source, origin, or cause. From Greek, equal meter, mother. And that's from the Century Dictionary. And then we have a quote. All in tragedy, the tragic myth is reborn from the matrix of music. It inspires the most extravagant hopes and promises oblivion of the bitterest pain. And that's from Friedrich Nietzsche's N-I-E-T-Z. Nietzsche, my husband's in the background, Friedrich Nietzsche. And one more, all that openeth the matrix is mine. And that is from Exodus 34:19. And that would be the Old Testament in the Bible. So here we go. Anyone can make a mistake, but this was a humdinger. And mea culpa, mea culpa. The conclusions I'd leapt to were all mine. Sam had said nothing about runes, or even that what he'd sent me was a manuscript, only that it was the size of a few reams of paper. In a single day, I'd nearly run over my landlord, fled across 2 states, and almost gotten run over myself by an avalanche, while dallying with a gorgeous Austrian scientist. And all for the wrong parcel. I promised the gods I'd stop batting so many strikes if fate would stop throwing those curveballs. But that didn't help solve my new crisis. The real package from Sam was still missing. And now, thanks to my overreaction, maybe Sam was too. As I made my battered and bleeding way down the mountain, Wolfgang tried to fill me in about the rune manuscript he'd sent me. Not an easy task on skis, especially since we were both anxious to reach the base camp clinic where I could get patched up. He did manage to explain en route that when he'd come to Idaho to start me on this project, he'd intended to give me the manuscript first thing. But he found I was still off at Sam's funeral. When I stayed away so long and his other professional commitments called him out of town, he put the runes in the mail so I'd get them when I returned. Then, this morning, when the pod sent Oliver to look for me, Wolfgang took a drive by the post office himself. When he saw me take off in a panic like that, he decided to round me up on his own. When Wolfgang and I got down the mountain, I asked him what the runes in my backpack were and what I was to do with them when I couldn't even read them. He explained they were a copy of a document he'd been asked by my family in Europe to bring me, and that it was his understanding that the runes were connected somehow with the manuscripts I just inherited from my cousin Sam. He said as soon as I got medical attention, we could sit down and talk in confidence. He'd explain everything else he knew. We spent an hour at the base camp clinic, surrounded by astringent smelling bottles, and the pandemonium of the ski patrol dashing about with stretchers and beepers, hauling injured parties from the wounded mountain. In their midst, I let the medicos slap me on a metal table, shoot me up, bandage my head, and put 14 stitches in my arm. All chit-chat between Wolfgang and me naturally had to be curtailed here in the chaos of the surgical theater. But I could still think private thoughts. I knew that our nuclear project couldn't be a front for Wolfgang Hauser's junket to Idaho. For starters, it was a given that he was a high-level official of the IAEA, or he couldn't obtain clearance to set foot inside our site, much less to eyeball the U.S. government security files of somebody who had high-level clearance herself. So there was no question he was legit. One key unanswered question still remained. How was it that Professor Dr. Wolfgang K. Hauser arrived in Idaho while I was off in San Francisco at Sam's funeral? How had anyone known, as someone must have in advance, that Sam's death would place those other still missing documents in my hands? With me shot up with drugs by the surgeon and my stitched up arm in a sling, Wolfgang and I agreed it would be best if he drove me home in my car and had someone from the office come over to Jackson Hole and collect the government vehicle. The journey back home was rather a daze. The pain kicked in as soon as my anesthetic wore off. Then I remembered, too late, after taking the codeine pill the doctor had given me, that I usually overreacted to codeine. In short order, I felt as if I'd been hit over the head by a hammer. I was out cold for most of the trip, so my question was left unanswered. When we got back, it was well past dark, though later I couldn't even recall giving directions to my house or how we arrived there. I did remember sitting in the car in the driveway and Wolfgang asking whether he should keep my car to get himself to his hotel or come inside and phone for a taxi. My reply and everything else remained a blur. So, imagine my surprise upon waking up at dawn the next morning to find myself tucked into my own bed and my backpack and yesterday's clothing, along with a stark black ski suit I suddenly realized with a jolt was not my own, all piled on a chair across the room. Under the covers, I seemed to be wearing nothing but my stretchy silk long johns, which left little to the imagination. I sat up with the covers spilling about me and saw the shaggy head, tanned arm, and bare muscular shoulders of Professor Dr. Wolfgang K. Hauser, protruding from my sleeping bag on the floor. He stirred and rolled over on his back, and I could just make out his features in the early morning light sifting through the high transom windows. Those thick, dark lashes shadowing strong cheekbones, the long, narrow nose, cleft chin, and sensual mouth, combining to suggest the profile of a Roman sculptor. Even in repose, he was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. But what was he doing half naked in a sleeping bag on my floor? Wolfgang Hauser's eyes opened. He turned on his side, propped himself up on one elbow, and smiled at me with those incredible turquoise eyes, like dangerous tidal pools with hidden currents, like the river. As you see, I stayed here overnight, he said. I hope you don't think it was too forward, but when I helped you out of the car last night, you passed out in the driveway. I caught you just before you hit the ground. I got you down the steps somehow and out of those torn and bloody clothes, and I put you straight to bed. I was afraid to leave you here until the drugs wore off, and I could be sure you were all right. And are you? I'm not sure, I said, feeling my head still full of cotton wool and my arms still throbbing with heat. But I'm grateful you stayed. You saved my life yesterday. If it weren't for you, I might be at the bottom of the canyon right now under a mountain of snow and rubble, and I'm still pretty shaken. You haven't eaten a bite since noon yesterday. Wolfgang sat up and unzipped the sleeping bag. But I have to leave town. Thanks to yesterday, I'm behind schedule. Why don't I make you breakfast? I know where things are kept in your kitchen. Your cat showed me last night. He seemed to expect me to make him dinner. So I did. I don't believe it, I said, laughing. You saved my life, and you even fed my cat? By the way, where is Jason? Perhaps he's being discreet, said Wolfgang with a smile. Then, his back turned, he crawled out of the sleeping bag, wearing nothing but his undershorts, grabbed his black jumpsuit from the chair, and pulled it on quickly. You couldn't help but notice, even in just this brief glimpse from the back, that Professor Dr. Wolfgang K. Hauser had a truly magnificent physique. All sorts of dark visions suddenly flooded my brain. And we're going to skip down as she's thinking very sensual and sexual thoughts. And there's some comments there. And we're going to skip about 3 paragraphs. And now it's Wolfgang speaking. Yesterday, everything went wrong between us because I tried to rush into things when I ought not. I don't want that with you. I admire you greatly, my dear. You're very strong and brave. Do you know that your name was once an ancient name for Jerusalem, now the holy city of 3 religious faiths? In its oldest form, Ariel meant lioness of God. Lioness, I said, regaining my real voice for the first time since that kiss. That's some reputation to live up to. So is Wolf, he told me, again with a smile. I get it. We're both hunters, I said, smiling back. But I work solo, while your kind travels in packs. He released the strand of my hair he'd been playing with and regarded me with a serious expression. I'm not hunting you, my dear, though you still don't trust me. I'm here to help and protect you, nothing more. Any feelings I may have for you are my problem, not yours, and they shouldn't interfere with the goals or mission of those who sent me here. You keep saying those who sent you, but you never say who. And why hasn't anyone told me anything about it? I demanded with impatience. Yesterday, you claimed you were my uncle Lafcadio's friend, but he's never mentioned your name to me. I think you should know I'll be seeing him this weekend at Sun Valley. It won't take much to learn the truth. I said an acquaintance, not a friend, said Wolfgang Hauser, turning away with no expression. He looked at his hands. Then he stood up and looked down at me where I sat in the rumpled bedclothes. Have you finished? Not quite, I said, warming to my theme. How does it happen that everyone seems to have known I was getting that bloody inheritance in the first place, even before my cousin was dead? I'll tell you the answer to everything if you really want to know, Wolfgang said quietly. But first, I must say, I fear such knowledge can be very, very dangerous. Knowledge is never dangerous, I told him, feeling my anger uncoiling. Ignorance is dangerous, especially ignorance of things that affect your own life. I'm sick of everyone hiding things from me, claiming it's all for my own good. I'm sick of always being kept in the dark. As I said it, I suddenly realized how much I meant it. It was, at the root of things, what was wrong with my whole life. It wasn't just fear of the unknown, of a mysterious parcel, even if the contents of that parcel might get people killed. It was ignorance itself. It was never being able to ferret out the truth. It was the compulsion for secrecy, rife through my industry, dominating even my own family. The idea that nothing could ever be done openly, that everything required conspiracy and collusion. Thanks to Sam, I'd become a real master of this game. Thanks to Sam, I trusted no one on earth, nor could anyone trust me. Wolfgang was watching me with a strange expression. My sudden passionate outburst had surprised me too. Until now, I hadn't realized how deeply these feelings had lain buried in me, or how quickly they could rise to the surface. If that's what's required to win your trust, then I'll always tell you whatever you want to know, regardless of the danger to either of us, he said, with what seemed great sincerity. For it's vital that you trust me completely, even if you don't like the answers. The person who sent me here is also the one who asked me to give you that manuscript of runes. He motioned to my backpack sitting on the chair. Although you have never met her, I suppose you will recognize the name. It's your aunt, Zoe Ben. I guess I thought perhaps she passed away. Interesting. We're going to stop there. So if you want to know more, you're going to have to come back for the next video. All right, you guys. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.